Hey everyone, it's Kayla here for Soy and Shea. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. If you caught the November vlog that I did, you would have heard one of the very last things I said was that I was stopping off at Bunnings on my way home to pick up some wood so I can make another scrunchie board to go into the shop. Now I actually did pick up a couple of different things to go on the trolley, which you would have seen in that earlier footage, but today what I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to make a new scrunchie board using some of this plywood. So this is just a very basic piece of plywood that I have picked up. This particular piece here is 897 by 600 wide and it's a 7mm thickness. Now I went with this piece. You can get bigger sheets and cut them down to size, but I went with this piece because I didn't want to be cutting it and I just thought this was a really good size as it was. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to change this into a scrunchie board. Now the first thing I'm going to do with this board is something that not everyone is going to be able to do, and that is I'm actually going to use the XTool M1 and I'm going to engrave across the top of here to say Scrunchies and the price of them. Now if you don't have a laser engraver, don't worry, you can still follow the rest of the instructions later on in the video about how I do all my placements and things like that for the Scrunchies, and instead either find someone who has got a laser engraver and get them to engrave a piece of wood that you can attach to the top, or print up something on your printer and get it laminated and stick that to the top with what it is and the price as well. So this is just an extra little step that I am going to be doing to mine, but you don't have to do it if you don't have the same tools. There are workarounds. But let's get the M1 all set up and then we'll get the etching in place and we'll start that bit first. If you've seen any of the videos I've done in the past where I've used the XTool M1, you know that usually I have a really big riser attachment under here where I can put my base plate in at different levels. For this, because my plywood is too big to go into the machine, what I've had to do is take it off the riser and we're just going to use the machine as is, and I've taken the base plate out of the bottom of here, and what I'm going to do is put my piece of wood onto my tabletop and then I'm going to sit the M1 on top of the wood and we're going to do some etching without that base plate. And when you are doing that, you need to make sure that in the creative space element that we change it over and tell it that's what we're doing. So let's get this bit set up. Alright, so I did just spend a bit of time making sure that we've got the machine centered across the wood. I do also have just in here a center line on my piece of wood here, so I know where the actual center is when we're lining up the image here. You can see we don't have that base plate in there. And the other thing I did just do is I popped my little sewing table tray on here, and that's just to make sure that this is all nice and even. You can see the light just shining through. It's all nice and even in there, so we're not going to get an uneven etch. Alright, so now that I've got the machine all set up exactly where I want it to go, I'm going to switch it on and then we're going to head over onto the creative space software and we're going to put the design and get it etched onto this piece of wood. Okay, so as you can see, we are in the XTool creative space. I do apologise about the hum of the machine in the background. Unfortunately, to get some of this set up, we do need to have the machine set up. I made sure that I connected it. A few things have changed in the program with the latest upgrade. To make sure that my machine is connected, I come in here and pick whichever machine it is I've got turned on and click on connect. It comes up with. So we've already got that one. We can see that we've got the little green light to say it's all ready to go. Now, I'm pretty proud of myself on this one, I have to point it out. I've done a pretty good job of lining this piece of board up. You can see here's our little center line on our piece of plyboard, and look how close that is to the center line of our design. So that's going to make it so much easier, making sure that our design is actually lined up on our piece of board and is going to look good once it's etched. Now we need to do a few settings here. First thing I'm going to do is tell it that we remove that base plate. So we're going to click on base plate removed. And this is really important because you can see the picture has now changed just a little bit because it needs to give it a different focus point. We're also going to get it to measure how far away that wood is from the laser so it knows how much strength it needs to give that really good etch on here. I think that is a little bit too high. We've actually not got 3mm plyboard, so let's go user defined and we'll remeasure that and see what it comes up with. It still comes up at the same one, so we'll leave it at that. Now what I'm going to do is come over into my little X up here, and I already have my image from when I did the last one saved in here. I've got it in my XTool file on the computer. There it is, the Scrunchie engraved. So we're going to bring that in, and that should all be the same height as what I used previously. Now it is all grouped together, so I'm just going to kind of center this in the middle of my artwork. So let's go align, I can't see it, align center. I actually don't want it centered down there though, I want it right towards the very top of my board here. Oh, horizontal align. There it is. Alright, so I'm going to be really happy with how that's come up. I am going to change my power here to 100%. Let's have a look. I'm just going to see what it actually recommends for our plyboard that's increased that. So it actually reckons to get a nice etch, we might actually only need 50 power and 150 speed. So we're going to go with that actually, because that looks like it's a nice, going to give me a nice deep engrave there. So happy with that. Really don't need to do much more with this design. I am going to do the framing to make sure that it is in the right place. So I'm just going to click on framing and we'll go and see what the machine does. So as you can see with that framing, it did start a fair way down the board there, which means I'm losing a lot of like realty space down the bottom to put my little dowels, to put my scrunchies on. So what I'm going to do is move my board a little bit down in the machine so that the image starts further up. You can't actually change it on the software. We have to move the board in this case. So let's get that moved. Okay, so after a little bit of fiddling around with it, you can see that I've managed to get that center line to actually show in the image again. I have just given the wood a little bit of a knot to get it into the middle. Let's do some framing and see if this is going to sit in a better place this time. That is looking much better. It is not too far away from the top, so that is going to sit beautifully on there. Alright, now that I'm happy with that, happy with the framing, we're going to say framing complete, go to process, and then we're going to click on start. of the machine. It is looking really good. I just need to erase that from off of the top, and then I'll show you how I do the placements for the dowel that I'm going to use to hang my scrunchies with. Alright, so we are on the table here and we're going to start working out where we need to place our dowels on our wood so we can drill the holes for them. Now, you could eyeball it if you want to, but I want mine to look symmetrical and I want to make sure everything is in a really nice place on here. I've got my tape measures and rulers. I know from doing the previous board I can get 4 across, and I'm pretty sure I can actually get 5 down. Now on the one that's actually in the shop, I've only got 4 down because on the 5th one I made space to put a basket for some little petite scrunchies. Now with this one I'm actually going to also be making a board specifically for the petite scrunchies, so I will bring the one home and put some extra pegs, but for this one I am going to put my 5 rows of scrunchies on here. Now when I do this sort of working in Australia and having been born in the UK, I usually always use centimeters for a lot of my measuring, but when it comes to sewing and woodworking, I tend to actually always convert into inches because it is usually a lot easier to get better increments on it than it is with the centimeters to get more accurate sort of placings. It's just what I find easiest. So I am going to be working in inches for this, but you can still apply the same methods if you prefer working in centimeters. So as I said, I know I can fit 4 scrunchies across here. Now I can pretty much eyeball that and go, yep, I need dowels here. But a better way of doing it is pretending that we have 4 squares going across here. One thing I have already worked out on here, let's shuffle it down a little bit so you can see. I've worked out how far down I want my scrunchies to sit. If we move that one out of the way, put one there that's actually got a tag on it. I've already worked out how far down I can actually have my scrunchies sit. So I put my little ruler on here and I'm going to put my first dowel about this far down. And when my scrunchie sits on it, remember it's not going to be in the middle of the scrunchie. Your scrunchie is going to sit down on the dowel like that. So you're not going to measure in the middle. You want it to for where the scrunchie is actually going to sit. And I've already worked out we're going to come 8 inches down from off the top, and that will sit nicely under my sign so you can still see it. Next thing I'm going to do is say, right, we've got 4 squares across here. Let's move them out the way. My board across here is actually 23 1/4 wide. Yes, 23 1/4 wide. So what I do is on my phone, hopefully we'll be able to see this. If not, I'll put something up on the screen. I'm going to say 23.25 divided by 4, because that's how many squares that we've got. So I know, whoops, 23.25 divided by the 4 squares. So that means each of our squares are going to be 5.8 inches across for our scrunchies. So I need to work out where to put the first dowel in from the edge. So we're going to divide that by 2 to find the center point of that square, which gives us 2.9. I'm actually going to round that up just to make it a little bit easier to 3 inches. So what I've got my little ruler here. I'm going to measure from this side here down 8 inches, and also on this side. And then I'm going to put my ruler so it goes across here. And then at the 3, I've got that all lined up so my ruler's nice and straight at that 8 inch down. I'm going to come to my 3 mark, and then I'm just going to put a little mark in there where I'm going to drill my hole. I'm going to come back to my calculator, and we had 3. And I'm going to add on that 5.8 for how big my square is. And that will give me the center point for my next square, which gives me 8.8. So we've got to go 1 little marking in from the 9 to give 8 in there. And then I'm going to add on another 5.8, which will give me 14.6. So we'll go here. And then my final one should end up being just a little under 3 inches from the end, but that's not going to make too much difference. We've got 2.4 down here, and now we've got where our first lot of scrunchies are going to go. So now to work out where we want them to go going down the board, and we're going to do exactly the same thing, except for this time I worked out I could get 5 going down. If we move them out the way, and I'll actually grab my tape measure this time so that it is long enough, I am going to measure from that 8-inch mark, and we have 27 1/4. So if we say 27.25, and we're going to divide that by 5 squares. Now remember, with this one, we actually want the dowel to be at the top of each square. So when we do the dowel for this one, we need it to be at the top of the square. So we're ending up with a square that's 5.45. So we'll actually call it 5.5 just to make it easier. And what I'm going to do is grab my ruler, and we are going to measure down 5.5. So I'm just making sure my ruler is nice and straight against the edge of my board here, and we're going to go 5.5. And then just to show you, so that scrunchie will sit on there, and then the next scrunchie will sit on there. And you can see that has got a really nice distance between it. So I'm going to finish measuring all this up, and then we will prepare the dowel. Okay, so now it is time to prepare the dowel, and this time round on my original board I used dowel which was 9.5 mil, but Bunnings didn't have any of the 9.5, so I decided to get the 12.5. I decided to go up a size rather than come down, and I actually really like this thickness. I think it will look really good. These lengths are 1.2 meters, and what I worked out with my previous board is that a really nice length for me personally was 15 centimeters. It was long enough that I could add, you know, 4 or 5 scrunchies onto it, but not so long that people would walk by and catch it on their shoulders or poke themselves in the eyes and stuff like that. So I decided 15 was plenty long enough for me. And at 15 centimeters, with these being 1.2 meters, I can get 8 pieces out of each piece of dowel, and I've got 20 holes that need to have pieces of dowel in, which means I need 2.5 of these. Now, as I said, the board that's in the shop I'm going to bring home and put another layer across the bottom, so I'll still use the rest of these. Anyhow, what we're going to do is start measuring these up, and you'll notice I have gone back to centimeters this time because 15 centimeters is just easier to measure than inches. So I've just got my tape measure. Let's grab a pencil, and I'm just going to mark off 15 centimeter lengths. Now, rather than remeasuring each and every one of these, I'm going to use a little bit of a cheats method. Make sure these are all lined up. I've just got another square ruler. I'm just going to mark across them like this. That will just make it a little bit quicker. And whenever I am doing stuff like this, I always hear my grandfather's voice in my head saying, measure twice, cut once. It's just something that's always there. Alright, so now that I've got all of those marked up, I have got a little hacksaw, and I should be outside, but it's hot out there. So I'm just going to do it on my table here, and I'm just going to use my hacksaw to cut through these. See if we can balance it on those to give myself some room. So that's the first one cut. I'm using a hacksaw to do it so that I actually get really nice ends on them. If you try using things like a jigsaw or anything like that, it's going to be quicker, but you're going to end up with splintered ends. If you've got a drop saw, if your partner's got a drop saw, get them to cut these. It's so much easier. But I think I might end up having to take them outside because it's going to create a lot of sawdust. So I'm going to go and get these cut, and then we'll be back and we'll drill the holes into the main board. Alright, so I was going to drill the holes in here. What I did is I put the board on top of my hardboard here, and I was drilling the holes, but it would not go through this hardwood. The tip of this would not go through the hardwood, and it was doing a little bit of twisting. So I think it's actually going to be safer for me to go outside with it. I have a 12.5mm drill bit in here. That is the size of the dowels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go outside and I'm going to drill the hole bits. I'm actually going to do it over the grass. I know so many people are going to be rolling their eyes at me, but I'm going to do it over at the grass. There's something soft for this to go through and hopefully doesn't tear my board. And I can also kind of sit on the board to make sure that it doesn't twist. I did find that it twisted and pulled at my arm. So I'm going to go and try that. So I've cleaned this up the best I can. What I will say to anyone who wants to make one of these, do it like I did my first board and use the 9.5mm dowel instead of the 12mm or 12.5. This drill bit is just too big and chunky for the thickness of this plyboard. If I probably had a 9mm or 12mm plyboard, this would have gone through a lot better, but because it's not very thick, it has just chewed up some of the layers as it's gone through, but that's okay. Once we get them in, I will get some wood glue just to fill in the bits where there is a little bit of damage, but learn from my mistake. If they haven't got 9.5mm where you are, go to another hardware store and find the 9.5. It is well worth finding it. But what I'm going to do now is just push my dowels in until I can just feel them on the back, and they're going to be nice and snug in here. So I'm just going to keep pushing them all in here. I'm making a big mess. I promise the first one I did went together so much more smoothly than this one, which is why I decided to video making this one. But that's always the way. Things never go smoothly on the videoed ones. I've still got a little bit of the label on this one. So I'm going to make sure it's at the back, down the bottom. Push that one in. Yep, that one's just in, and because we've got the 12.5mm dowel and the hole, they are nice and snug in here. I haven't had to use any glue to hold them in. You can see they're nice and firm once they're in. So I'm going to get all of these ones in, and then I will show you. Alright, so as you can see, I have got all the dowels into my board now. The next thing I need to do is make sure I can hang this on the wall in the shop. So I'm going to put some picture wire onto the back of it. So I'm going to flip it over. Now there is a little bit of damage on the back of the board. Some of it I have created myself. And this really big one across here, that was actually on the board when I picked it up. I forgot to check the back of it to make sure that there was no damage. I only checked the front. Luckily, no one else is going to see it. What I am going to do is get some wood fill before I take this one down the shop and actually just fill in all of these big marks, and that will help to hold my dowels in place. But like I said, if you use the 9.5mm dowel, you will not have the problem. It was so much easier than this 12.5. Now what I'm going to do to be able to hang this onto the wall in the shop, I have this little picture hanging hook kit. We've got some little eyes, I have some picture hanging wire, and there's also the hooks in here for when I actually get it down the shop. So what I'm going to do, and I know this bit's a hard bit, I'm going to get my little eyes into the side here, and then we're going to pop some picture wire on it. Now putting these little eyes in can be a little bit tricky to get them started, so I've just got a tiny screw here and I've just poked a hole in there, which will kind of, I know we've got some shadows here, but it kind of makes that starting point for your little eye, and it just makes it then a bit easier to twist these and get them to bite into the wood. So now I've got that bitten in, let's twist that side in. Now to make sure that this does hang nice and straight, let's measure how far down I actually put that in. We went at 4 1/4. So I'm going to come onto this side, I'm going to measure down 4 1/4. I'll get that little screw again. I'm just going to push it in to start the little pilot hole for my eye. I don't think I've got that one quite far enough in. Alright, grab our little eye and we'll twist that one in now. They can be a bit tricky, but once they're bitten, then it's much easier just to twist them in. Okay, so we've got our picture wire now on there, and you can see that our scrunchies are going to sit really, really nicely on there. This one has been a little bit more of a mission than my previous one I made, but it's still looking just as good now that we've got everything in there. It just needs a little bit of a tweak. Next thing we're going to do is going to take this one down the shop and I'll show you it hung on the wall. Okay, so there it is, all hung up on the wall along with my original one, and I also did a little petite one as well. Now you can see at the moment I have got a few empty pegs and I've also got some double ups, but that also means I have got plenty of room to add lots of new fabrics on here, and I've got lots of them at home. Now originally I had all these petite ones, as you saw, in a little basket that was hanging off the bottom. Now I was going to put another row of pegs along there, but I'm kind of thinking if I do that it's going to look really funny because they're going to hang off the bottom. So like if we actually grab one of these off here and hang that down there, it's going to hang off the bottom, and I'm not sure that's going to look very good. So we might just leave it as it is. As you can see, I've got plenty of pegs. You know, we've got 2 pegs with the Santa scrunchies on, and yeah, I've kind of spread them out a little bit. Sometimes people will look at this one and not see a design, but it'll probably repeat it over here and they'll see it. So I'm going to leave it as it is. Again, I've got some empty pegs that I need to get home and sew some more scrunchies, but there it is. I'm really pleased with how this has come up. It's going to look really good as people walk in through the door. Very, very happy. So as I said in the video, learn from my mistakes on this one. This was my my original board and I used the 9.5mm dowel on it, and they drilled through really, really nicely. When we made this petite board, I actually only used 8mm dowel, and again you can see that it's gone through really, really nicely. This one here, however, being the 12.5 dowel and how thin this ply board is, it does chew the board up a little bit. So if you are wanting to make one, if you're going to use the 12.5mm dowel, get thicker ply board. It's going to make it heavier though, so I do recommend sticking to the 9.5 on there. So that is how I have made my scrunchie boards. Super, super easy. You really don't need a lot of homeware skills to do them. You just need a drill. If you use the dimensions that you are getting, which I did with my ply board, you don't even need to cut that. You just need to cut your dowel pieces down, but super, super easy. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me as I made the scrunchie boards for the front of the shop here. If you did, why not leave me a thumbs up and any comments down below. And until the next video, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you then. Bye.